Good evening. I'm Captain Marcus Brooks. After 28 years in the skies, I thought I'd seen every kind of passenger there is. I was wrong. Tonight, let me tell you what happened at the Denver flagship lounge connected to Flight 906. Daniel Voss walked up to the entrance of the Meridian Club Lounge in Denver wearing a plain gray t-shirt, faded jeans, and carrying a worn backpack instead of the leather carry-on most members favored. He held his boarding pass out toward the hostess stationed at the podium, a young woman named Brooke Sanders, whose eyes moved over him in a fraction of a second. The clothes, the backpack, the absence of anything that read as money, before she'd already decided what to do with him. "I'm sorry, this is a private lounge," Brooke said. "Premium passengers only." "It's a valid first-class ticket," Daniel said, holding the pass steady. "Already scanned at the gate." She didn't look down at it. "We get a lot of people who try things at this door." Behind him, two men in tailored suits walked past with nothing more than a nod from Brooke. No ticket check at all, while Daniel stood holding his backpack strap as a small line gathered behind him, strangers glancing over with open curiosity. Brooke raised her voice slightly, just enough to carry. "This lounge has a standard," she said. "We have to be careful about who we let in." What Brooke didn't know, what none of the staff working that afternoon knew, was that the man she'd just humiliated in front of 30 travelers owned the gold letters mounted above the entrance. He owned the lounge chain. He owned her paycheck. And in less than an hour, he was going to use every bit of that. Daniel hadn't come to Denver as a CEO that day. He'd come as a ghost. For 18 months, the Denver flagship had posted numbers that made it the crown jewel of his entire company. Member satisfaction above 95%. Food safety audits marked excellent every quarter. Complaint volume low enough that corporate barely gave it a second look. And yet, a different Denver had been quietly forming, somewhere outside the spreadsheets, scattered posts on travel forums, then threads, then dozens of strangers describing the same thing, being turned away at the door despite valid tickets, watching others walk past without a glance, complaints that seemed to vanish the moment they were filed. Two completely different lounges couldn't both be real, so Daniel had done the only thing he trusted, not an announced inspection that would give the staff 3 days to scrub the floors and rehearse their smiles, but a plain first-class ticket and the same clothes he used to wear at 19, walking in exactly as any ordinary member would. He remembered exactly what 19 had felt like, working 2 jobs to afford flights home during college, saving for months just to sit in coach and dream about the cabin up front he couldn't afford yet. He'd built this company in part on a promise to himself that no one who'd worked as hard as he once had should ever be made to feel small at a door he owned. Standing outside the Denver lounge in his old clothes felt less like a disguise and more like stepping back into a version of himself he never wanted the company to forget. He had his answer before he'd even made it through the door. Brooke eventually let him in grudgingly, the way someone lets in a problem they've already decided they'll be cleaning up after. A supervisor named Wesley Pruitt led him past the bright front room leather chairs, a marble bar, a spread of imported cheese and fresh fruit gleaming under warm lighting, down a narrow hallway to a cramped table near the restrooms facing a blank wall. "Someone will be by," Wesley said, and disappeared before Daniel could respond. He didn't mind the corner. It turned out to be the best seat in the house for seeing exactly what the lounge didn't want its members to see. From where he sat, he had a clear line to the main room, where the good food and the good service flowed freely toward a certain kind of guest, and an equally clear line to a side door near the coat check that most members never noticed at all. Over the next 20 minutes, Daniel watched 3 separate groups approach that side door, none of them holding boarding passes. He could see all of them greeted warmly by a staffer who checked nothing, simply waved them through after a brief, practiced exchange near the doorframe. Cash changed hands quickly folded and passed with the ease of people who'd done it many times before. One group looked like a small group of social media influencers, phones already raised to film themselves stepping into the marble-floored main room, clearly thrilled at whatever arrangement had gotten them past a line the rest of the building respected. Meanwhile, out at the main entrance, he watched Brooke turn away 2 more legitimate members, an older Hispanic man traveling with his daughter and a young woman in a modest hijab, each of them holding valid tickets. Each of them met with the same practiced skepticism she'd shown him. He noted the pattern with the same clinical distance he once used reviewing quarterly reports, except here the numbers were people's faces, people's dignity, quietly filed under a metric no spreadsheet would ever capture. A father tried 3 times to explain his ticket was legitimate, before giving up and walking his daughter toward the gate instead, her small backpack bouncing as she glanced back at the lounge. She wasn't allowed inside. He thought about the letters posted at corporate headquarters. the ones he'd personally approved years earlier, about treating every traveler with dignity, regardless of appearance, and felt something harden in his chest, watching how far this single location had drifted from those words, while the paperwork claimed otherwise. It wasn't just theft, it was a lie, told in two directions at once, to the members being turned away, and to the company that trusted its own reporting. The scheme assembled itself in his mind, cold and clear. Someone on staff was selling unauthorized access through the side door. Friends, influencers, anyone willing to pay cash for a taste of the exclusive lounge experience, while legitimate members who didn't fit a certain narrow picture of what a premium passenger should look like were being quietly filtered out at the front, kept off the numbers, kept out of the complaint logs whenever they pushed back. The lounge's glowing metrics weren't a mystery anymore. They were a story someone upstairs had been carefully curating, built on who got let in and who got written out. He could have made the call right then. He had enough, but the math wasn't finished, and 30 feet away, it was about to become personal. An elderly man using a cane made his way slowly toward the check-in podium, his boarding pass held out with the careful pride of someone who'd earned every mile of his first-class seat across a long career. Brooke glanced at him, glanced at his weathered jacket, and delivered the same line she'd used on Daniel an hour earlier. "I'm sorry, sir, this lounge is for premium passengers only." "I am a premium passenger," the man said, his voice steady but tired. "I've flown this airline for 30 years. My wife's waiting for me at the gate, and I told her I'd have a cup of coffee ready when she got there." Brooke's expression didn't soften. "I understand, sir, but I still need to see confirmation that matches our current member list." "It's the same pass I've used every single trip," the man said, holding it toward her, his hand not quite steady. "What exactly is different about it today?" Daniel was on his feet before he'd fully decided to be crossing the room toward the podium. "His ticket's valid," he said. "I watched him show it. Let him through." Brooke turned toward him with visible irritation. "Sir, I need you to stay in your area. We've had complaints about you since you arrived." "I haven't made a single complaint," Daniel said quietly. "I've been sitting in the corner you put me in." "I'm going to need you to step back," Brooke said, her voice climbing, carrying clean across the room now. Heads turned. "Call security. We have a guest causing a disturbance." The room went still. Daniel stood in the middle of his own flagship lounge in a gray t-shirt and worn shoes, being publicly cast as the problem for defending an elderly member being turned away from a lounge he'd rightfully earned. The old man looked between them, confused and a little frightened by the sudden attention, gripping his cane a little tighter. "Sir, I don't want any trouble," the old man said quietly to Daniel. "I can just wait for my wife by the gate." "You shouldn't have to," Daniel said. "You paid for this exactly like everyone else in that front room did." That was the moment 20 minutes of patient observation ended. He took out his phone and made one call. "This is Daniel Voss," he said, his voice low-level and absolutely certain the voice that 41 lounges worth of regional managers knew to obey without question. "I'm in the Denver flagship. I need a response team here in 10 minutes. Lock the side entrance immediately. Pull every camera file from the last 90 days and secure them. Get me the access logs and the staff schedule for this shift. Nothing leaves this lounge. Not through the front, not through that side door. And get corporate security down here now. We have unauthorized access being sold at this location." He ended the call into a silent room. Brooke stared at him, the practiced certainty on her face cracking for the first time, because ordinary passengers in gray t-shirts did not make phone calls like that. "Excuse me," she said quieter now. "Who exactly do you think you are?" He didn't answer her directly. Instead, he turned to a young staffer near the podium, Maya Chen, 23, the one who had actually scanned his ticket at the very start and quietly told Wesley it looked valid to her, a small act of honesty that had cost her nothing but a sideways glare from her supervisor. "Maya," Daniel said, "could you bring me the guest log and the access tablet, please?" She was already moving. She'd already understood. The regional director arrived 9 minutes later, breathless, 2 security officers and a compliance investigator behind him. He crossed the room, took one look at Daniel and straightened immediately. "Mr. Voss, sir, we came as fast as we could." The name landed like a struck bell. Conversations near the front of the lounge died mid-sentence. Someone near the coffee bar actually set their cup down. Daniel watched the truth move across Brooke's face in stages, the podium, the lanyard, the practiced certainty, all of it draining away as she finally understood exactly who she'd turned away at the door, humiliated in front of a crowd, and just tried to have removed by security. Wesley, standing near the hallway to the back office, had gone visibly pale already, calculating how much of what had happened over the last few months was about to surface. 2 of the staff who'd worked the side door drifted casually toward the exit, only to find a security officer already stationed there, watching them without a word. The investigation moved quickly because the evidence had been sitting in plain sight the entire time. Nobody had simply thought to look, because nobody with real authority had ever walked in wearing a gray t-shirt before. The camera files told the story in full. Weeks of strangers waved through the side door for cash, none of them logged as members, none of them ever appearing on the official guest counts. Weeks of legitimate members turned away at the front, disproportionately the ones who didn't fit Brooks' narrow, unspoken idea of what a premium traveler looked like, a pattern the footage made undeniable once someone finally compiled it. The access logs, when pulled against actual boarding pass scans, showed dozens of unauthorized entries that never should have existed, alongside a suspicious number of legitimate members marked as unable to verify and quietly turned away. The satisfaction reports glowing on paper had been curated the same way surveys selectively sent only to the guests staff had decided were worth impressing. Complaints from everyone else, deleted from the system before they ever reached corporate. A cut of the side door cash had apparently been shared upward enough to keep at least one person above Wesley comfortably looking the other way. The compliance investigator flagged a pattern going back nearly a year. Spreadsheets full of deleted tickets that laid end to end, painted a picture no honest audit should ever have missed. How did corporate never catch this? The investigator asked, more to himself than to anyone in the room, scrolling through months of doctored survey data. Because nobody who mattered ever walked through that door in a t-shirt before today, Daniel said. Daniel read through it all in the back office with the door open, methodical and unhurried, while Brooke offered 3 different explanations that each collapsed the moment the timestamps were laid beside them. First, she claimed the side door was for verified corporate partners. Then she claimed she hadn't known cash was involved. Finally, she simply stopped talking, staring at the table between them, the weight of the footage leaving nothing left to argue. "You looked at me at that door," he said finally when she'd run out of things to say. "And in under a second you decided I wasn't worth your standard. That's the part I need you to actually hear. The unauthorized access, the falsified reports, that's fraud, and the investigators will handle it as fraud. But deciding a human being doesn't deserve basic respect because of what they're wearing, that's the one thing this company was built to make impossible. And somehow you built an entire door policy on it." She had no answer. There wasn't one left to give. Daniel terminated Brooke for the discrimination pattern, the falsified reports, and her role in deflecting complaints. Wesley followed for running the side door pipeline. Every staffer who'd taken cash for unauthorized access lost their job as well, and the fraud itself was handed to the authorities, since selling access to a controlled area carried real, legal weight beyond just a company policy violation. But Daniel had never believed in simple stories about people. And there was Maya, the young staffer who had scanned his ticket honestly, who had quietly flagged it as valid when it would have been easier to stay silent, who told investigators the full truth without hedging once she was asked. She'd noticed the side door pattern months earlier and mentioned it to Wesley, only to be told to focus on her own line and let management handle things upstairs. She'd been overruled and sidelined, kept on only because she worked fast and didn't cause trouble. When the real test came with no idea who Daniel actually was, she'd told the truth anyway. That was the only kind of honesty that meant anything. He kept her on through the entire investigation, and when the lounge reopened 6 weeks later, he brought her onto the leadership team, rebuilding it from the ground up. New staff personally trained. Access logs cross-checked against real boarding passes at every entry point. Independent audits from people who didn't report to the lounge they were reviewing. Hours of new training focused on the thing that had failed worst of all, how staff treated the person standing in front of them, regardless of what that person happened to be wearing. The old man with the cane received a personal call from Daniel during the investigation, along with an apology and a standing invitation back to the lounge whenever he traveled through Denver. He accepted, and on reopening day, he was among the first guests through the door, greeted this time by Maya herself, who walked him personally to a window seat near the front. On reopening morning, Daniel stood in the bright front room, not in disguise this time, with the new staff gathered around him and Maya standing among them, wearing a supervisor's pin. "People think luxury is the leather chairs," he said, "the marble floors, the imported food. It isn't. You can have every bit of that and still run a room with no soul in it at all. I just spent 6 weeks proving exactly that." He paused, glancing toward the door. "Luxury is when someone walks in tired, half expecting to be turned away, and you give them the one thing nobody can fake, their dignity. Every guest, every time, no matter what they're wearing, especially when you don't know who they are." He let that settle over the room before he continued. "A service that looks beautiful on the outside and treats people with contempt on the inside is just a nicer-looking insult. When a system starts hiding what it really is, forging reports, deleting complaints, fooling the people upstairs. The only real leadership left is having the nerve to tear it out, because the people walking through that door are trusting us. Don't ever forget who's trusting you. I've flown with passengers dressed sharp enough to look like they owned the airline, and I've watched a man in a gray t-shirt tear down an entire corrupt lounge operation with nothing but patience and a phone call. At 35,000 feet, or standing at a lounge door in Denver, everyone deserves the same basic respect. It's character, not what someone's wearing when you meet them, that truly separates us. If this story moved you, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next flight.